Hi guys, Rowan here with Sandstone Care, and happy Halloween. That's why I am dressed like a skier from the 80s. At least that's what I think I'm dressed like. I'm here with Dan. Dan, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dan. I graduated Sandstone early this year. It was actually New Year's Eve was my last night at the Rally Point House. So yeah, that's me.
So how long have you been sober now, Dan?
Let's see. My sober date was August 21st of last year. So was that a year and a couple months now?
Yeah.
So.
And how's it feeling now?
It feels really, really good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ups and downs with life, but overall, when I compare it to my using life, it's a million times better.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to just hear kind of a snapshot of kind of what drove your use and just kind of understand a little bit of the backstory of what sought you to try to find recovery in the first place.
Okay. So I've had anxiety issues my whole life. I got panic attacks when I was a very young child, to the point like I couldn't stay anywhere outside of my house for, anywhere overnight at all.
Okay.
Without having a severe panic attack. And that anxiety was more so the social anxiety aspect of that kind of led me to start smoking pot because it made me feel included in a group, and I started that when I was like 14 or 15.
Okay.
Pretty much overnight, like I'd say I started, and then a month later after starting smoking pot, I was using it every single day, all day. I did that until I was like 22 or 23. Before this point, I had never really, I had drank alcohol, gone to a couple parties, never really cared for it. Something switched in my head, and for some reason I wanted alcohol after that. So I stopped smoking the pot and I switched over to alcohol. What I found was that, with pot, when you're smoking that all the time, you can kind of still function. And you can get through your daily life. It's definitely hindering you in a lot of ways, but being a functioning pothead is a lot easier than being a functioning alcoholic.
Yeah.
So, see, I'm 29 now, so 22 to 28, good 6 years, I was a pretty heavy drinker with, on and off spells. I'd drink for a year, be off for a month, drink for another 3 months, be off for a month. Just off and on with my, family and friends trying to encourage me to clean myself up. During this time, I lived with my parents pretty much throughout that entire time until like the very end when I tried living alone, which didn't hash out well, because they ended up I stopped responding to them. They came and found me just passed out and overheating in a room, and it is a whole mess. So
yeah, it's scary for them.
Yeah, went back to their house again. This is about a month before I came to Sandstone. And I ended up putting myself in the hospital twice. I had a BAC of 0.40.
Yikes.
So that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the legal limit.
Yeah.
And that's coma or death for most people.
Right.
I actually, because I'd been drinking for so long, my tolerance was enormous, so I still remember that. I was conscious for most of it.
Wow.
Your body acclimates to whatever alcohol or drug you're using. And so I think that was the real point where I was like, okay, if I don't change something, I'm going to die. Maybe I wouldn't physically die, but spiritually I would be dead. My family would be done with me. I'm going to lose everything.
Did your family set that boundary, or was that just your perception?
It was my perception.
Yeah.
Nobody, I'm sure my parents would have let me stay at their house forever and kind of drug me along with that.
Yeah.
They would have been miserable having to do that, but they would have done it because they cared about me.
Right.
And that's always a hard line for family. It's you want to help, but you don't want to enable, and that line is so hard to define. At least when you don't, now I feel like I can really definitively define that line, but before, I came here and talked to other addicts and had some counseling, it's really blurry as to, okay, what's helping and what's enabling.
Okay.
But that was the point that I really, really did want to change, and I had no idea how. I tried going to AA. I tried some like IOP with Kaiser, which for anybody who doesn't know is intensive outpatient, which is just like you go in a few times a week for like an hour and a half, like kind of group therapy things. So I'd never tried anything inpatient. It was basically, you know, kind of like the last ditch effort.
Yeah.
And I went online and started researching different places. Sandstone ended up popping up, you know, and reading about like how Sandstone worked. It sounded really appealing to me that there was still freedom given to you, even while living at like Rally Point. You still get to live your normal life, go to work. It's not just you know, being locked in a facility.
Right.
Because what I have heard from other people who had gone to those programs is, or that had family that had gone to those programs, you go get locked up, then you come out, you no longer have that support system at all, and now you're back in the real world with real problems, and you know, shit hits the fan, so to speak. It's hard to deal with if you haven't had counseling to kind of deal with it at the same time.
Right.
So yeah, my parents were nice enough to actually pay for it out of their pockets. So,
that's huge.
Yeah, it was a, you know, amazing gift. And so I really came into this with the attitude of like, I will literally do whatever anyone wants me to do, because this is it. If I don't fix something now, I know I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
So yeah, coming in, my house managers, Ben and Walter, were just amazing guys. As were the counselors here. You know, I had a lot of good times with John and Brandon as well.
Yeah. And
I mean, the whole staff here. I mean, yourself included. It's always, you know, it's always great coming in. It's still great coming in. You know, I like being here. And that's actually the coolest thing about this whole experience was that, like, I come back and I'll see some of like the guys that I were at the house with, and it's like seeing, you know, your best friend, and I really do miss those times. Even though, you know, I'm talking about like 4 months, and most of these guys I only saw for like 2 of those months, but
right.
It's still like the connection you build is so strong because you have such a similar foundation. So both building those relationships at Rally Point, and then also having the structure of Ben and Walter were the house managers, and really being able to see them, you know, some people who have some time under their belt, who are really happy guys doing cool things with their life. You know, it's like, wow, I want that.
Yeah.
I want that. And I think that was, those two things, having the camaraderie at the house and being able to see those guys, were really changing in terms of my commitment to staying sober, and the idea that being sober doesn't have to be boring.
Right.
It can actually be better than anything else. You can have a better life than a normie. And I know that sounds really, like, if I think about listening to, like, I'm listening to myself talk about this from the perspective of somebody who's still using.
Yeah.
And it's like, this all sounds like corny bullshit, and I get that. I totally understand that. It's impossible to actually get this feeling until you commit yourself to something, you know, commit yourself to a program, whether it's here at Sandstone or somewhere else. You need to form a community, and I think that was the biggest thing that I lost. I think that was either John or Brennan said that, you know, it was like something like community is the opposite of addiction.
Yeah. And
I wholeheartedly believe that, because I was so isolated in my drinking. I think the feeling of being alone was the absolute worst thing about it. You know, you still have people around you, but everything you're doing is in your own head.
Right.
No one's really getting to know you because you're constantly having to hide everything.
Right.
And, you know, once you start lying, it's a snowball effect of, okay, well, I lied about that, so now I have to lie about this. And then that also breeds a sense of like, well, you know, who cares? I'm lying about everything. Why does it really matter?
Right.
And if people believe me, then I get away with it. So might as well just keep on that train.
And there's a little power trip in that too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so getting away from being a liar all the time is one of the most liberating things. And even now I still have to catch myself. Like, it's little stuff that you don't realize. Like, it doesn't seem like a big deal. A tiny white lie to your parents. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but those things, they put up walls between you and other people. And so the whole point is that when you're living an addict's life, you're constantly putting walls around you until you're in a fucking little box. Sorry, I don't know if I curse on this. I don't know if it matters.
It's okay. Continue.
You put yourself into a little box and you're all
Yeah.
alone. And yeah, coming here and, you know, getting the treatment and having the community, it just opened my eyes to, I can have a completely normal life just without drinking and drugs. And that's, I don't know, it's not scary to me anymore. That used to be such a scary thought. It's like, how could I possibly get through my life? I'll never have fun again. And that's, it couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, you don't have those nights of like drug-induced bliss, but those aren't real. And all of those things don't really matter at the end of the day. What really matters to you, you know, if you're lying there in a bed thinking you're going to die, you're not recounting the nights of, oh, it was really sweet when I got really stoned or really drunk. You're thinking about how many meaningful moments you had with people.
Right.
And I just think if you live your whole life using, you're going to hit that point where you're like, holy crap, there is nothing I can look back on that's truly meaningful, that I, you know, moments that I would really like to go back to that actually had true, like, love, emotion, feeling in them, you know, as opposed to just a drug-induced feeling of, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
And on that note, that's another thing I realized coming here. All the people you think that are your friends when you're using, I shouldn't say all of them, the vast majority of them, from my personal experience, disappeared the second I decided to get sober. Right. They were gone.
Yeah.
And I found people that I considered to be more of like somewhat friends or even acquaintances. They were the ones calling and checking up on me and seeing how I was. And it kind of made me reevaluate, you know, the people I kept close to me. Who actually cares? Who's actually gonna, you know, have my back? And who's just there because they like getting drunk with me?
Right.
So.
And you know, transitioning on, I think, you know, the treatment is, you know, designed to be successful. As you said, a lot of, you know, the people that you were talking to before you went into treatment were struggling when they got out of treatment. And I'm wondering what that transition was like for you. You know, now it's been almost a year since you last, you know, officially were engaged with Sandstone.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that transition out of that program like for you?
So it was definitely like exciting. You know, you're getting out of the house, you're back on your own again. That's always fun. It can also be scary to a certain degree because now you don't have checks and balances anymore. It's like you're back to, if you want to be lying and sneaking things in and trying to get by that way, you can, because
Right.
nobody's actually, you know, drug testing you to make sure you're not.
Right.
So that personal responsibility, you know, comes to the forefront. I think I was fortunate that I found an app called Sober Grid while I was here,
Okay.
and I ended up forming a friend group of, it was mainly me and two other people that really, like, we'd have other people pop in, but it was really the three of us that just kind of formed a friend group, and we
Yeah.
started hanging out at least every weekend, you know, doing something. It was kind of like our own personal alternative to AA,
Yeah.
because none of us really, we all would go to AA, but it never really clicked with us as to, like, this is how I want to maintain my sobriety, because it is huge, I think, to have some sort of a sober community after you get out of treatment. I think without that, it's really, really hard, if not impossible, to stay sober.
Yeah.
Because those are the people that are actually going to, like, recognize if you're in a bad spot. You know, they might be able to help you realize that you're headed towards a path that might lead you back to using before you actually get to that point.
Yeah.
Whereas people who are, you know, normies, they may not actually, you know, they may not realize anything is going on. You know, some of the signs are really subtle. You know, like being alone a lot of the time, or I don't know, having weird hours at work and stuff like that.
Because some of the triggers that might cause a normie to I don't know, you know, go on a little Netflix binge might be the same thing that would cause you to drink again.
Right.
And so that might not even occur to them that would be the kind of thing that would set you off.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think having that community also made it for me where it was like if I was struggling at all, I knew exactly who to contact.
Yeah.
And once you form bonds with people on that level, it's more of an instinct of just like, oh, like I had a thought about drinking, I need to talk to my friend Amanda and get some help with this, or just to get it off my chest.
Yeah.
And just, it's little things like that, making people aware in your life when you are feeling like you're struggling, that can make all the difference. Like I found that simply telling somebody, hey, I had some cravings today, can actually make those cravings diminish a ton.
Really?
It's just kind of like because now I can't hide it, because now I've told somebody. So it's no longer just in my head, it's out in the world. And so I can't, it'd be much harder to get away with it now.
Yeah.
And so kind of checking yourself and putting in those like roadblocks, so to speak, of like, okay, well I told my dad or I told my best friend, now everybody knows that I'm on edge, and if I do end up drinking, they're gonna know instantly. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people. Once they'll end up having those thoughts, and then they're already, they've got the bottle in front of them, or they've got their drug or whatever right there in front of them, and that's when they're thinking about calling somebody, and at that point sometimes that's too late.
Yeah.
Because you've got it there, and when you're craving it and it's in front of you, that can be incredibly hard to turn down. And I've had people I've gone to in this program who have called me after, they've just relapsed, and, then it's, not to say of course it's never too late, you can get back on track, but every time you do something like that, it makes it harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
Having that built up time is really a motivator, at least for me, and I think for other people as well.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, I really appreciate your time and your perspective, and I'm glad to hear you're doing so well with it.
Yeah, thanks. It's great being here. Like I said, I love coming back to Sandstone, so I'm sure I'll see you guys again soon.
Absolutely. Well, take care, man.
Yep, you too.